The Annual Blooms of Mystery, Chapter 1, The 30-Year Secret. The first rain of autumn in Seattle always brought a melancholic hush to Eleanor's quiet home. At 80, she moved with the graceful deliberation of one who had learned to navigate the world with a gentle hand and a watchful eye. Her small art gallery, once her passion, had been sold years ago, leaving her with ample time for reflection, for memories, especially on days like today. October 26th. The day, the anniversary, 30 years. 30 years since the jagged edges of grief had torn through her life, leaving an emptiness that time could soften but never truly fill. 30 years since Daniel, her vibrant, laughing Daniel, her adventurous sailor, had been swallowed by the unforgiving Pacific. His ship, the Sea Star, lost in a ferocious storm off the Oregon coast. No bodies recovered, just the crushing weight of absence. And for 30 years, on this very day, a ritual had unfolded. A knock on the door, a delivery, always the same. A breathtaking bouquet of exotic blue orchids, Daniel's favorite. His deep ocean blue eyes had always mirrored their vivid hue. And always a small, elegant card with a single handwritten phrase. Always remembered. No name, no sender, just the silent assurance that someone, somewhere, remembered Daniel, remembered her pain. Eleanor had tried, year after year, to unravel the mystery. Calls to the florist, Mr. Hendricks, a kind, elderly man who had run Petal and Bloom for decades. He would always offer a sympathetic smile, a shake of his head. Confidentiality, Mrs. Hayes, a client's privacy, but rest assured, they're paid for many years to come. He would never waver, never reveal a name. The orchids were a bittersweet comfort, a tangible link to Daniel, a whispered acknowledgement that his memory lived on beyond her own heart. But the anonymity was a nagging ache. Who was this silent benefactor? A long-lost friend of Daniel's? A family member she didn't know? A kind stranger? This year, however, was different. The 30th anniversary. A milestone. The knock came precisely at noon, as always. The delivery man, a young man she didn't recognize, handed her the familiar box. She opened it with trembling fingers. The exquisite blue orchids, as vibrant and perfect as ever, lay nestled within, their silent beauty a poignant reminder, and beneath them, the usual card, always remembered. But tucked beneath the card, something else, a folded piece of cream-colored paper, thicker than the card, with a distinct, almost linen-like texture, not from the florist, not their usual stock. Her heart quickened. She pulled it out. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, a little shaky, as if written by an older hand, yet firm in its purpose. A single line, stark and clear. It is time for the truth. Seek out Liam in Astoria. He remembers. No signature, no return address. Just those chilling, intriguing words. Liam, Astoria. Daniel had often spoken of Astoria, a gritty, historic port town in Oregon, a place he frequented in his early sailing days. And Liam, the name resonated. A friend, a shipmate, a drinking buddy. A name she hadn't heard in decades. A forgotten name from a life that had ended too soon. Eleanor felt a jolt of electricity. 30 years of unanswered questions, of silent offerings, and now this. A clue, a directive, a whisper from the past calling her forward. The mystery, once a source of quiet contemplation, had suddenly become urgent, demanding. She clutched the note, her gaze fixed on the blue orchids, no longer just a symbol of memory, but a key to a truth she had unknowingly waited a lifetime to uncover. Chapter 2: A Daughter's Resolve. The next morning, the note still clutched in her hand. Eleanor called her daughter, Sarah. Sarah, 50, lived across town, a pragmatic, level-headed woman, a successful architect, who had inherited her father's quiet strength and her mother's keen intellect. She loved her mother fiercely and had always been her unwavering support. "Mom, is everything all right?" Sarah's voice was warm with concern. "No, darling, not entirely," Eleanor began, her voice a little shaky. "But perhaps it will be. I need you to come over. I have something to show you, something extraordinary." Sarah arrived quickly, her brow furrowed with worry. Eleanor, sitting in her armchair, laid out the blue orchids, the familiar, always remembered card, and the mysterious new note on the coffee table. Sarah read the note, her eyes widening. "Liam? Astoria? What is this, Mom? A prank?" "It doesn't feel like a prank, Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "It feels like a revelation. For 30 years, someone has been sending me these flowers, anonymously, and now this. Someone wants me to know the truth, the entire truth." Sarah picked up the orchid card. Always remembered. She knew the story of the anonymous flowers, had seen them arrive every year, a bittersweet annual tradition. But this new note, it changed everything. "We have to go to the florist, Mom," Sarah declared, her practical mind taking over. "Mr. Hendricks, he has to tell us who sent this. He's been delivering them for 30 years. Eleanor nodded. "I've tried before, darling, many times. He always refuses to reveal the client. Confidentiality, he says." "Not this time," Sarah said, her jaw set. "This is different. This is about a deep, long-held secret. And the fact that someone wants us to know now. Mr. Hendricks must have been told that. He's a good man. He'll understand." They drove to Petal and Bloom, the quaint flower shop that still carried the comforting scent of roses and damp earth. Mr. Hendricks, a man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, greeted them with a warm smile. "Mrs. Hayes, Sarah," he said, "a pleasure to see you both." Eleanor held out the anonymous note. "Mr. Hendricks, we need to talk about these flowers and this note." Mr. Hendricks's eyes, which had been so kind, now held a flicker of something guarded. He took the note, his gaze sweeping over the words. A sigh escaped him. "Ah, so it has come to this. They finally want you to know." "They?" Sarah interjected, her voice sharp with anticipation. "Who are they, Mr. Hendricks? Who has been sending my mother these flowers for 30 years? Mr. Hendricks looked from Eleanor to Sarah, a profound sadness in his eyes. "I've been sworn to secrecy, Mrs. Hayes, for decades. But the sender, they instructed me if a specific, very particular letter arrived, one that wasn't from them, that this was the sign that the time was right, that the truth should finally be revealed." "So you know who it is?" Eleanor pressed, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded slowly. "I do, and I assure you, Mrs. Hayes, the sender always acted out of the deepest, most profound love and respect for you, and for Daniel." He paused, his gaze fixed on the blue orchids in the box. The funds were always provided well in advance, for many, many years, a true act of devotion. "But who?" Sarah insisted. "We need a name, Mr. Hendricks. We have a name here, Liam, in Astoria. Is it him?" Mr. Hendricks's gaze shifted to the side, a clear sign of his internal struggle. I cannot give you a name, dear, not directly. It was a promise, a very old, very sacred promise." He sighed. "But if the note says Liam in Astoria, then perhaps That is where you should go." He offered a small, knowing smile. Sometimes the truth waits patiently for the right moment to emerge. His refusal, while frustrating, also confirmed her suspicions. This was no prank. This was something deep, something meaningful, and the answer lay in Astoria. "Thank you, Mr. Hendricks," Eleanor said, a new resolve hardening her features. "We will go to Astoria." Leaving the florist, Sarah looked at her mother, her expression a mix of awe and trepidation. "So we're going to Astoria, Mom? To find a man named Liam? Who may or may not be the one who sent the flowers. He holds the key, Sarah," Eleanor said, her gaze steady. "I feel it. After 30 years, the truth is finally within reach." Chapter 3. The Salty Dog and Faded Memories. The drive from Seattle to Astoria, Oregon, was a journey through changing landscapes. From the bustling city, they passed through lush forests, then along the dramatic coastline, the restless Pacific a constant presence. Astoria, when they arrived, lived up to Daniel's old descriptions. A charmingly gritty port town, nestled at the mouth of the Columbia River, its hills dotted with Victorian houses, its waterfront humming with the ghosts of a maritime past. Eleanor felt a wave of bittersweet nostalgia. Daniel had loved this place. He'd told her stories of his days here, of boisterous nights in waterfront pubs, of the camaraderie among sailors. She felt his presence here, a faint echo in the salty air. "Where do we even start, Mom?" Sarah asked, looking around the unfamiliar town. "Daniel always spoke of a place called the Salty Dog," Eleanor mused, her eyes scanning the storefronts. An old sailor's bar. He and Liam would spend hours there. It might be a good place to start asking about Liam. They found it, a weathered building with a peeling paint sign depicting a grinning bulldog in a sailor's cap. The interior was dim, filled with the comforting scent of stale beer and old wood. A few grizzled old-timers sat at the bar, their faces etched with the lines of a life lived at sea. Eleanor approached the bartender, a man with a kind, craggy face. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm looking for someone, a man named Liam O'Connell. He used to frequent this bar many years ago with my husband, Daniel Hayes." The bartender's eyes widened slightly. "Liam O'Connell and Daniel Hayes? I remember them. Two of a kind, those two. Daniel, always with a laugh. Liam, a bit quieter, but always there. They were good friends." He sighed. "Tragic what happened to Daniel. Good man. Shame about the sea star." "Yes," Eleanor said, a lump forming in her throat. "It was. Do you know where I might find Liam now? Is he still around?" The bartender nodded slowly. "Liam still lives here, always has. Never left Astoria after Daniel. He's up near the lighthouse, just past the old cannery. Small house, blue trim. You can't miss it. Old-timer. Keeps to himself mostly now, but he'll remember Daniel." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor, a lead, a direct connection. The journey wasn't in vain. "Thank you," she said, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Thank you so much." They left the bar, the mission suddenly clear. They drove towards the lighthouse, a majestic white tower standing sentinel over the churning Pacific. The small house, blue trim, stood precisely where the bartender had indicated, nestled on a wind-swept hill, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean. As they approached the door, Eleanor's heart pounded. This was it, the culmination of 30 years of mystery, the answer to a question that had haunted her for half her life. Sarah knocked. A moment passed. Then the door opened a crack. An old man, his face deeply lined, His eyes, a faded blue, peered out. He had a shock of white hair and a weary yet kind expression. "Liam?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft, tentative. The old man's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing through them. He stared at Eleanor, then at Sarah. "Eleanor?" he rasped, his voice rough with age and disuse. "Eleanor Hayes? Is that truly you?" "Yes, Liam," Eleanor confirmed, tears springing to her eyes. "It's me." He stepped back, opening the door wider, a mix of surprise and a profound sadness in his gaze. "Come in, please. It's been a very long time." Chapter 4. A sailor's debt and a sister's love. Liam's small house was humble but meticulously kept, filled with the faint scent of pipe tobacco and the distant roar of the ocean. Maritime maps covered one wall, interspersed with old photographs of ships and sailors. He gestured them to sit on a worn couch, his movements slow, deliberate. Eleanor held out the blue orchids, then the anonymous note. "Liam," she began, her voice steady. "I've received these flowers for 30 years. Every anniversary of Daniel's death, always anonymous. And this year, this note came with them." She handed him the note. It says, "Seek out Liam in Astoria." He remembers. It says it's time for the truth. Liam took the note, his eyes sweeping over the familiar handwriting. His face, already etched with the years, seemed to deepen with a profound sadness. He looked at the orchids, then at Eleanor, his gaze filled with a quiet anguish. "The orchids," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Always the blue ones, Daniel's favorite." He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Yes, it is time. It is time for you to know, for all of you." He settled back in his chair, his eyes fixed on a faded photograph on the wall. A younger Daniel, broad-shouldered and smiling, standing on the deck of a ship, an arm around a younger Liam. "The Sea Star," Liam began, his voice low, almost a murmur, yet clear in the quiet room. "The storm. It was a monster, Eleanor, a true beast. The waves, higher than mountains, the wind, screaming like a banshee. We knew we were going down. The engine gone, the hull breached. Chaos." He paused, his eyes distant, lost in the storm-tossed memories. "Daniel, he was always the bravest of us, the calmest in a crisis. He was helping secure a life raft. A wave hit, threw me against the mast, broke my leg. I was done for, drowning." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Daniel, he saw me. He didn't hesitate. He swam to me, dragged me towards the raft. My life vest, it was torn, useless. He took off his own vest, strapped it onto me, told me to hold on. He pushed me into the raft, just as the Sea Star groaned her last. He looked at me, Eleanor, his eyes, they held no fear, only concern. For me, for you." He smiled, and then he was gone, pulled under by the currents. He saved my life. He gave me his vest. He gave me his life. Eleanor listened, tears streaming down her face. She had known the general circumstances of Daniel's death, but never the full, agonizing details. His self-sacrifice, his unwavering courage. He had died a hero. "That," Liam said, his voice raw with emotion, "was the first part of my debt, my eternal debt to Daniel. To live, to remember him, to honor his sacrifice." He paused, collecting himself. "But there was another part, a deeper one, a secret, a promise I made to him long before that last voyage." Liam's gaze shifted, looking past Eleanor, as if seeing something beyond the walls. "Daniel," He was my best friend, but he was also the great love of my sister Margaret's life. Eleanor's breath hitched. Margaret? She had known Liam had a sister, but she had never met her. Daniel had never mentioned her in that context. Margaret, Liam continued, a tender sadness in his voice. She loved Daniel fiercely. From the moment she saw him, when they were just teenagers, he was so charismatic, so full of life. Everyone loved Daniel. He smiled faintly. But Daniel, he only had eyes for you, Eleanor, from the day he met you. He told Margaret gently. He loved her as a friend, as a sister. But his heart belonged to you. Margaret, she was heartbroken, of course, but she was also incredibly kind, and she understood. She never held it against you, Eleanor, or against Daniel. She respected your love, and she remained Daniel's friend, my friend. The night before his last voyage, Liam said, his voice dropping, Daniel came to me. He had a premonition, a dark feeling about the storm. He gave me a letter, addressed to me, and a package, a small sealed box. He told me, Liam, if anything happens to me, you must promise me this. You must always look after it, Eleanor. And every year, on this day, send her blue orchids to remind her that my love is always with her, that I'm always remembering her. And the package, it's for Margaret, if she ever needs it, a token of my friendship. Liam's gaze met Eleanor's, a profound earnestness in his eyes. Margaret never married. She loved Daniel until the day she died. She never forgot him. And she never forgot his last wish. For 30 years, Eleanor, it wasn't me who sent those flowers directly. It was Margaret. She paid for them. She arranged everything through Mr. Hendricks, swearing him to secrecy. It was her final act of love and loyalty to Daniel and to you. After Margaret passed away 5 years ago, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion, I took over. I made sure the payments continued. It was a promise to her too, to honor her devotion, to honor Daniel's wish. Eleanor was speechless, tears pouring down her face. The truth, when it came, was far more profound, far more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Not just Daniel's sacrifice, but his foresight, his enduring love, reaching out from beyond the grave, and Margaret's selfless, unrequited love, her quiet fidelity, blooming in the form of blue orchids every year. It was a testament to a love so pure, it transcended even death. Chapter 5, The Last Letter. Sarah, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally found her voice. Margaret, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. She sent them all these years, for Dad. Liam nodded. A remarkable woman, my sister. She carried her sorrow with dignity, but her love for Daniel, it was a quiet fire that never died. And the note, Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. The one that told me to come to you. Who sent that? Liam picked up the cream-colored note again. Ah, that. It was Margaret's nurse, a kind woman. She knew the whole story. Margaret told her in her last days. She felt it was time, that you deserved to know. She knew I would respect her wishes. She sent it after Margaret passed. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes filled with a gentle sadness. There's one more thing, Eleanor. The letter Daniel gave me, the one he asked me to keep. I never opened it. It was for me. But it spoke of you, of his love for you, and it contains the true essence of the always remembered message. He rose slowly, walked to an old wooden chest in the corner, and retrieved a small, sealed, slightly yellowed envelope. He handed it to Eleanor. This is it, his last words, to me, but truly For you. Eleanor took the letter, her fingers tracing Daniel's familiar, bold handwriting on the front. To Liam, for when the time comes. Her heart hammered. This was Daniel's voice, reaching across 30 years. She broke the seal, her hands trembling. She unfolded the paper, her eyes blurring with tears as she read, "My dearest Liam, if you are reading this, then the storm claimed me. And I want you to know, brother, that I fought. But I fought for you, for Eleanor, for the life we all shared. The sea star is going down. I used my last strength to get you to the raft. My vest is yours. Live, Liam. Live for both of us. And now, my final request, my most important one. Eleanor, my beautiful Eleanor. She will be heartbroken. She will be lost. I need her to know, to always know, that my love for her is endless, that it transcends even this death. Every year, on this day, October 26th, I want you to send her blue orchids, my favorite, her favorite. Make sure they arrive, always, with the card, just a simple message, always remembered. Let her know that even in death, I remember her. I love her. I am always with her. It will be a secret between us, Liam, a quiet comfort for her, a silent promise from me. And Margaret, my dear, sweet Margaret. She loved me, Liam, I know. I wish I could have returned her love in the way she deserved. But my heart was always Eleanor's. Tell her I always cherished her friendship. I always admired her spirit. The package I gave you, it's a small painting I did of her, a small token of my affection. Tell her to find her own happiness. Tell her I wish her well. Liam, you were the best friend a man could ask for. My brother, my confidant. Look after Eleanor. Be there for her. And remember me, not with sorrow, but with the joy of the life we shared. My last thought, Liam, will be of Eleanor, of her smile, of her eyes, of our life together. Tell her I loved her more than words can say, more than the ocean itself. Goodbye, my friend. Until we meet again. Your brother, Daniel. Eleanor finished reading, her body shaking with sobs. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor. Daniel, his foresight, his love, his gentle farewell, not just to Liam, but through Liam, to her. Always remembered was his voice, his eternal promise. Sarah picked up the letter, her own eyes filled with tears as she read her father's last words. She saw him not just as the father who died too soon, but as a man of immense courage, profound love, and incredible foresight. His last act was not just survival, but an act of profound love. "Dad," Sarah whispered, her voice choked. "He was thinking of you, Mom, right until the very end." Liam, watching them, his own eyes moist, gently nodded. He truly was, and Margaret, she fulfilled her part of the promise until her last breath. It was her deepest joy to know she was still connected to him, to you, through those flowers. Eleanor felt a deep, profound peace settle over her. The ache of the unknown, the lingering questions, the sense of an unfinished goodbye, it all dissolved. Daniel had not simply vanished. He had said goodbye. He had made a promise, and that promise had been kept, faithfully, lovingly, for 30 years by Liam and Margaret. The blue orchids, once a mystery, now pulsed with a new, vibrant meaning. They were not just a reminder of death, but a celebration of eternal love. Chapter 6, Legacy and Love's Enduring Bloom. The drive back to Seattle felt different. The silence in the car was no longer filled with the quiet tension of an unsolved mystery, but with the warm glow of understanding and acceptance. Eleanor and Sarah shared stories of Daniel, now with a new perspective, a deeper appreciation for the man he was, for the layers of his character they had only now begun to fully understand. Eleanor felt a profound sense of closure. The grief for Daniel, which had lingered as a dull ache, now softened into a gentle remembrance. She understood that his love had not been cut short by the ocean's fury, but had, in fact, found a way to transcend it, blooming faithfully each year in the form of those blue orchids. She and Sarah kept in close touch with Liam. He became a cherished, living link to Daniel's past, sharing more anecdotes, laughing about their youthful adventures, and reminiscing about Margaret's quiet strength and devotion. Liam, too, found comfort in the connection, finally able to share the decades-long burden of his promise and to see Eleanor's peace. On the next anniversary of Daniel's passing, October 26th, the blue orchids arrived. As always, Eleanor took them from the delivery man, her eyes filled with a new kind of tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude and profound love. Always remembered, the card read. This time, the words resonated with the full weight of their meaning. It was Daniel remembering her. It was Liam remembering Daniel. It was Margaret remembering Daniel. It was the enduring power of love and loyalty. Eleanor placed the magnificent bouquet in a place of honor. Beside it, she placed a framed photograph of Daniel, young and vibrant, his blue eyes sparkling. And beside that, a new addition, a photograph Liam had given her of Margaret, a younger Margaret with a kind, gentle smile and a distant, almost wistful look in her eyes. And she added a small photo of Liam, a younger version of him alongside Daniel, both beaming. She looked at the orchids, then at the photos. The secret that had veiled her life for so long had finally been unveiled, not as a dark deception, but as a testament to the extraordinary kindness and profound love that had woven itself through her life, unseen. The final truth wasn't just about Daniel's sacrifice, but about the invisible threads of connection that bind us, the quiet promises kept, the unrequited loves that still nourish the world. Eleanor realized that even in death, love could create ripples that reached across time and distance, connecting souls in ways unimaginable. She no longer felt alone in her grief. She knew that Daniel had always been with her, not just in memory, but in the tangible form of those annual blooms, sent with a love that transcended even death. And she knew that his memory was kept alive not just by her, but by the quiet devotion of others, whose loyalty was a beacon in the storm. The annual blooms of mystery had transformed into the annual blooms of enduring love, a vibrant, living tribute to a past that was not just remembered, but eternally cherished. Her life, once marked by profound loss, was now enriched by the profound understanding that love in all its forms truly lasts forever.